like to cover now an example for wind loads, and this is a big warning. And I'll restate what I said before. Many reports, they will use generic library of computations. They were built before 2021. And this will say, hey, if the shed is this, let's say 10 meters wide, 4 meters high, and 15 meters long, in region A, that we will, let's say, accommodate for South Australia and Victoria, then you can use these specific frames for that shed. However, that can be wrong, and that's what I'm gonna show. I want to show here. So I'm here. I'm doing a comparison with two sheds. They're both region A, exactly the same shed. One is in Mount Gambier, so it's in the middle of the town. The other one is in Port Macdonnell here. So the Port Macdonnell one is kind of in front of the ocean, as you can see. This one here is enclosed in the town. So when we actually do the site-specific analysis, then shed A in Mount Gambier give us a design wind speed of 37.35 meters per second. This is gonna include the analysis of the terrain category, importance level, shielding, all of that. The other one, the shed B, gave us a design wind speed of 40 meters per second. So the outcome for those sheds is, if I was using that generic library of comps, it worked on the left side, but on the right side, on the shed B, it didn't work. I need better wall girts. It's not passing, and I need better footings and mullion footings. Obviously, I'm not considering here the soil reports. That's just, you know, a quick analogy, a quick experiment, so we can compare these two sheds. So I just want to bring that up so you can see that if you're using those Excel spreadsheets that doesn't consider the site-specific wind, you might be doing something wrong depending on where that shed's being placed, and depending on the orientation, depending on many different factors. Here's another example that I've done a very similar study. This now is in New South Wales, and this shed A is in the middle of kind of lots of trees there. It's kind of a farm area, and shed B is in front of the ocean again. Obviously, I guess I'm exaggerating a little bit on this demonstration here, but you could build a shed there, right? And as you can see, this example here doesn't pass for the columns, for the rafters, and the column footings. So if you're using a library of comps and it's exactly the same, you're not using site-specific, that assessment could be wrong, because the wind in this case here is, if I'm not mistaken, 47 meters per second. So this is what needs to be assessed. So the wind loads, they can be a problem if you're not using site-specific. That's why it's very important, especially after 2021 with the updates, to review those calculations you have, or use a system that can give you site-specific engineering reports. Okay? So what does change from project to project? When you're calculating the VDAS, like velocity or speed for the wind, there are a few different factors that will influentiate that calculation. One of them is the wind region, if it's A, B, C, or D. The other one is the importance level. If it's a domestic garage or a farm storage that, you know, isolated, it's importance level 1 or 2. If it's a terrain category, if it's an open farmland or suburban streets, the topographic factor, if it's on a hill or flat ground, the shielding factor, if there are trees or buildings nearby, and the side wind speed, that's the final calculated value. So we can have exactly the same shed, but we can have different assumptions, not only in terms of the structure, but also in terms of the location, where it's gonna be, and this is gonna create different designs. So it's very common for shed business to believe that once a shed is engineered, they can use that as a base to design that in other different locations. But we have just proven to you here and have shown a workflow that that's not necessarily the case. You can encounter issues if you're using the same engineering. But obviously, guys, we want to be practical here. And that's why this library of computations, they're created in the first place, right? I'm not saying this to say, hey, if you're using library of comps, you're totally wrong. Because the engineer who did that for you, he might have used the worst case situation. In that case, you can use that library of comps. However, it's going to be over conservative, because, you know, some projects that you could use lighter frames, you're going to have to use the more conservative solutions, because it's considering that higher winds. So I don't see that as a very practical way. So it might be good for you to use a system, once again, that provides you site-specific engineering. Okay. All right. If you don't have a site plan feature, it's very tough to define a site-specific engineering criteria. So I I invite you to kind of have a go on Shedmate, and Shedmate gives all of that to you, which is very cool. Another thing I'd like to discuss here is in terms of project delivery. A lot of the frustrations I encountered in the past with engineers and shared businesses can be explained by this good, cheap, fast, right? It's like, hey, pick any two. If you want something that's very cheap and very fast, it won't be good. So that was an example. If you want a generic computation that you can have results in real time and you're not gonna be paying the engineers every time, well, it might not be as good, okay? If you want something that's cheap and it's good, it won't be fast, okay? But if you want something that's good and fast, it won't be cheap. So you got to pick one of the two and understand that it's very hard to have all of those. We're doing our best here on Shedmate to deliver the three, something that's good, that's fast and cheap, but this triangular here, it still applies. So just to summarize and getting to the end of it, discussion about real world pitfalls and misalignments. I had a very interesting case. We had a customer that before joining Shedmate, they were a franchise supplier. I won't name that specifically, but they were one of those big shed suppliers out there. And he wanted to compare Shedmate's engineering reports with theirs, and he wanted to compare to say, okay, I can transition to Shedmate because it's going to be very competitive. And when he first looked at our reports, he said, hey, your report's too conservative. And we were like, what are you talking about? And he said, no, the frames are too strong, blah, blah, blah. And then we asked him, oh, can we actually get the report you're comparing to? So just so we can see what's going on there. And we saw a few interesting things. One of them is the previous engineer that they used a generic wind speed, not site specific. So this specific shed was in front of the ocean, just like the example I showed you. So the design they're using pretty much wouldn't pass, or at least was being done in an effective way. So that was a reason why our design was a little bit stronger, because it was following the site-specific or wind reports. Two, this was for a specific sorry guys, my voice is going away, RHS shed. And the report was giving them a high strength grade of steel that was C450 in the report, but the builder had no idea about it. So he was just using commercial steel available. I don't know if in his case it was C250 or C350, but they're not using the C450. So by not following that, pretty much the liability shift to the builder because they're not following the engineering calculations. And that was oversight. They didn't notice that. And when we presented it to them, we said, look, I understand why you're saying that our report's a little bit conservative. It's because one, you're using the wrong wind speed for that project. Two, you're using the wrong grades of steel. So the result was the shed was under-designed and the liability shifted to them. So a myth, and that's something that generally comes after this kind of issues, is, all right, I can still use it. I can still use my library of comps. I can still use this, information that the engineer provided to me. But if anything goes wrong, the insurance will pay for it. And that's wrong. And that's another thing that I would like to clarify on this conversation here with you, is that if you deviated from a certified design, the liability can sit with the builder, not the engineer. And also, if you think that the engineer will bend the rules and if anything goes wrong, they go to insurance, the insurance will pay for it, that's also a pitfall. So I'll read this for you. I'll ask for the permission to read this. Professional indemnity insurance does not cover situations where an engineer knowingly provides a design that is unsafe, non-compliant, or below the standard of reasonable professional care. If a design is unintentionally altered against engineering judgment or outside the building code, the insurer has the right to deny any claim. In such cases, liability falls directly on the parties involved, and the engineer may also face personal, legal, and disciplinary action. Insurance is there to protect against unforeseen errors made while exercising professional risk, skill, and care, not as a safety net for deliberate shortcuts. So, if the engineer is not following the rules, the insurance won't cover for it. And even if the insurance covers initially the process, I have spoken with one of our independent engineers that is on our network for Shedmate, and he worked before on an insurance company, and he said, look, the insurance company will find the money in a way or another. They'll look, they'll assess, they'll get the reports, they will try to understand what went wrong, and they will go to the party that did the wrong part, and they'll ask for their money there. So they're not there, they're business, so they're making money, right? So they'll find it the challenge. So that generally doesn't work well, guys. So don't rely on insurance because that's not right. Okay.